To save his precious Omega, CEO Preston tore out my gland. He said I owed him. My son threw a tantrum, screaming he wanted that Omega to be his new papa. He snuck to my hospital bed in the middle of the night and tried to inject air into my foreline. There was really no need to rush. I was going to die soon anyway. I asked the system, when can I leave this world? The system, right now. 6 years ago, if I hadn't accidentally walked into Preston's room during a painting trip, he and Felix would have gotten engaged. I still remember the look in Felix's eyes when he burst in with his people during the chaotic second half of that night. Rage, disgust, like he was looking at something filthy. At that moment, Preston's teeth were still sunk into the back of my neck. I tried to pull away, but he grabbed me by the waist and dragged me back. He had permanently bonded with me. I was drenched in the overpowering scent of an alpha in a violent rut. Felix covered his nose and had his men drag me off the bed, then dumped a bucket of cold water over my head. They had a massive fight. I left in disgrace, cut my trip short, and went back to the orphanage. 3 months later, I collapsed from severe pheromone deprivation from my bonded alpha and was hospitalized. That's when the Sterling family matriarch appeared. Turned out I was pregnant. As an orphan, I had always desperately wanted a family of my own, so I decided to keep the baby. And because I had no other choice, old Mrs. Sterling brought me to the Sterling family estate. Felix left the country. Preston believed I had stolen what rightfully belonged to Felix, so he punished me. The moment our son, Cody, was born, he was handed over to the matriarch, and I became Preston's toy. He would force me into heat whenever he pleased. He'd watch with cold eyes as I clung to him, crying and begging, making a complete fool of myself. Because of the permanent bond, I was forever trapped by his pheromones. I fought back. I tried to run away, but without his pheromones for too long, I'd lose my mind. Headaches, vomiting, a fever that wouldn't break, my skin feeling like it was being sliced by knives even against silk sheets, and my Omega instincts made me submit to him, yearn for him. I could not leave him. Cody was my only reason for living, but he wanted nothing to do with me. He was raised by his grandmother with private tutors and nannies. Every time I wanted to see him, I had to find some way to please Preston. He would beg Preston to read him storybooks. When I tried, he complained my accent was wrong. The pictures I drew for him would end up in the trash can. A robot Preston bought him on a whim would be placed by his pillow. He fed the cookies I baked for him to the dogs. He only ever shot his water-bead gun at me. It hurt. To him, I was a flea on a fur coat, a speck of mud on his pants. He'd call me, "Hey, you." Only when Preston reminded him would he reluctantly call me Papa. I always told myself he was just a child, easily influenced. He'd understand when he got older. I waited until he was 5. 6 months ago, Felix returned from abroad. Preston celebrated by setting off fireworks all over the city. Felix started appearing at the Sterling estate frequently, always at Preston's side. Having him back, Preston was endlessly attentive to Felix. His eyes filled with a deep, unspoken affection. Cody adored Felix. In his eyes, Felix, who came from a prestigious family and was bright, poised, and elegant, was a much better match for his father than I was. As the three of them grew closer, my position in the Sterling household became increasingly awkward. My pheromones were so compatible with Preston's that my dependency was especially severe. When Preston went more than half a month without any contact with me, I started getting sick again. On the day I was too ill to get out of bed, Preston was taking Cody to see Felix's art exhibition. The servants looked down on me. I asked for water, but no one responded. I forced myself to climb out of bed, only to collapse on the floor. My heart was racing. My hands and feet were ice cold. I thought I was dying. I frantically dialed Preston's number and begged for help. His voice was cold. He said he had more important things to do and couldn't be on call for me 24/7. I heard Cody on the other end of the line, talking to Felix. "He's faking it. He's just jealous of Uncle Felix. Let him die. I want Uncle Felix to be my new papa." In that moment, my heart turned to ash. Preston did come back that day after all. The next day, Just after Preston left and I was starting to recover, a small cannonball shot through the door and knocked me back onto the bed. Cody straddled my waist, hitting me, pulling my hair, scratching my face, screaming insults. "You monster! You piece of trash! You made Uncle Felix cry." I stared up at the little monster on top of me. It was only today that I truly understood. Half the blood in his veins was Preston's, and the other half was also Preston's. With a sweep of my arm, I shoved him off me. He hadn't expected me to fight back. He tumbled to the floor with a thud, losing face and probably in some real pain. His mouth trembled, and his eyes turned red. The servants, who had been nowhere to be seen when I was being attacked, suddenly appeared, fussing over him and murmuring about how heartless I was. I didn't try to comfort him. I just watched with a cold, detached expression. Seeing this, Cody lunged at me again, screaming, "I'll kill you! I'll kill you! You trash from the sticks, you low-life who slept your way up. You're the reason my friends looked down on me. You ruined my life. You're not my papa." His eyes were full of hatred. This was clearly what he truly felt. I didn't know who taught him these things, or how long he'd thought them. I expected it to sting, but my chest just felt empty. Just as things were about to escalate, Preston returned. He picked Cody up. "Stop this nonsense." Cody always listened to Preston. Only then did he burst into loud sobs. Later, I heard that Felix took Cody from the estate for a few days to cheer him up. I didn't pay attention to how many days it was. Their perfect little family had nothing to do with me anymore. Not long after, Felix suddenly fell ill. A rare, sudden disease, glandular degeneration. Mrs. Sterling took me to the hospital. I saw Felix lying in bed, clutching Preston's hand and sobbing, worried he would never be able to have children. Cody was hugging Felix's waist, crying along with him. Preston announced he would have my gland transplanted into Felix. I looked at the still smiling Mrs. Sterling beside me and knew the decision had already been made. I calmly told Preston the consequences of his decision. Losing my gland will leave me with more than a dozen lifelong side effects. The sudden drop in hormone levels could drive me insane. I'll become frail, I'll be on medication for the rest of my life, and I won't live past 50. Preston answered quickly, as if he'd rehearsed it. "This is what you owe Felix." I wasn't surprised he thought that way. Look at him in his sharp suit, so handsome and imposing. A man from a dazzling family, an alpha at the top of the pyramid. Even though he was the one who tied my hands, held me by the neck, and slammed me against the door to brutally take me. For me to have him, it was like I owed the entire world a debt. Fine, I agreed. Because the Sterlings weren't asking for my opinion, they were informing me of their decision. And because I was so tired of this damn permanent bond. Preston hadn't expected me to agree so easily. His prepared speech was useless. His long lashes fluttered a few times. His ice sculpture face softened slightly, and he even deigned to explain. "It's not what you think between me and Felix. I promised I'd take care of him until he found his own alpha. You already have Cody. Felix needs this gland. I will compensate you. Medical technology is so advanced now, it won't have a major impact." He sounded so sincere. He even patted my hand. That night, he sent me into the operating room. Isn't that funny? The moment my gland was removed, word came that Felix's illness was a misdiagnosis. In the hours before the anesthesia wore off completely, I kept wondering why my life was so illogical, so nonsensical. Only after the system appeared did I get my answer. The world I was in was an angsty ABO novel with 2 male leads. I was an unlucky soul who was transmigrated into this world at birth, only to be forgotten by the plot. My entire existence was for the sake of suffering. The system said that to make up for its mistake, it would use its points to either restore my health or send me away from this world. Send me away. Are you sure, host? The system told me that my body belonged here. If I left, the body on the hospital bed would be left with only the ability to breathe on its own, slowly weakening until it died. It suggested I stay a while longer to say a proper goodbye to the people here. I opened my eyes through a haze and saw Cody standing by my bed, holding a syringe, secretly injecting air into my foreline. He couldn't wait to make room for his new papa. Forget it. Let Felix have them. I asked the system, when can I leave this world? The system, right now. My soul slowly detached from my body. For the first time, I could look at the me on the bed from an observer's point of view. A pale, fragile, emaciated Omega. Dark circles under his eyes, chapped lips, but you could still see the delicate beauty underneath, like a wilting mountain plum, the perfect image of a victim. I gifted him and myself a final, complete withering, hoping that when we began again, we would find our spring. Host, it's time to go. Okay. I was twisted and pulled into a spiral of blackness. Before my consciousness faded, I saw one last, blurry image. Preston and the surgeon who operated on me were standing in the hallway outside my room, discussing what to do with my gland. The bleak light washed out their figures, making it feel like I was watching an old black and white movie, hard to connect with. The doctor looked troubled. Ripping out a gland is like uprooting a tree. The tree is gone, the roots are torn. Even if you stick it back in the hole, it's still going to wither and die. A hint of guilt crossed Preston's face. Let's wait until he wakes up. I almost wanted to laugh, but it didn't matter anymore. Suddenly, the Preston in the vision looked toward me, calling out as if he sensed something. Leo. As the name left his lips, everything before my eyes dissolved into dust. I sank into darkness. I don't know how much time passed before I struggled back to consciousness. I found myself lying in a simply furnished apartment. A hand rested on my stomach. I turned my head and saw a naked man sleeping beside me. The man had broad shoulders and a thick chest, but his face was delicate, almost pretty. His skin was fair, his eyelashes long and thick, and he had a single tear-shaped mole under his eye. I couldn't remember who he was and stared blankly for a moment. The man woke up, sat up, and rubbed his eyes, giving me a harmless smile. Morning. The blanket slipped off him, revealing marks all over his body. I was utterly shocked. I shot up, bolted out of bed, and ran into the bathroom. System, what is? I stopped mid-sentence. In the mirror above the sink, I saw my original face. My features weren't that different from the ABO world, but without the influence of a second gender, the person in the mirror was just a fairly handsome young man. My body wasn't delicate, and my skin was even a bit rough. It all came back to me. My identity in the real world was similar to the ABO world, an artist whose parents had died young. I had been diagnosed with ALS. When I noticed the muscles in my fingers starting to atrophy and tremble, so much that I couldn't even hold a brush, I quickly used my life savings to move into this apartment I'd wanted for so long but could never afford. Then I traveled, spending money like there was no tomorrow. When I got back, I wrote my will, went to a bar, thinking I'd never even been with anyone, and used my drunkenness as an excuse to grab the best-looking guy I could find and take him home. But in reality, that night, aside from making a drunken fool of myself and doodling all over the man, I didn't do a thing. I woke up in the middle of the night, sobered up, and left a credit card for him to cover his emotional distress. Then I washed down 200 sleeping pills with beer and tried to kill myself. Of course, I didn't die. The system had offered me the chance to live by completing a transmigration mission. Host, I'm here. What did you want to ask? My illness, how is it? All better. I looked down at my hands. They were nimble, warm, with a healthy, rosy color. My eyes started to burn. I quietly slipped out of the bathroom, ready to send the man on his way. After Preston, I had no intention of getting into an intimate relationship with anyone for a long time. That included physical relationships. The man was getting dressed. If you're okay, I'll head out. I froze. What? You were a mess. I took care of you all night. I need to, go home and catch up on sleep. Oh, was that all? The man's eyes were clear, without a hint of deception. I felt ashamed of my assumptions. As he was leaving, he pointed to a painting of a cactus in my living room and asked sincerely, "Is this for sale? You like it? Gina would love it. I want to take it home for her to see." Gina Pei. I finally remembered who he was. He was Alex Pei. In the last few days before I decided to die, I was in such a fog that I paid no attention to anyone around me. Alex was the previous owner of my apartment. I'd heard he was single and Gina was his child. He sold the apartment to me and now lived in the building next door. He was my neighbor. I didn't know whether to be mortified or grateful that I hadn't asked his name. I quickly took the painting down for him and thanked him sincerely. It's a gift. If you ever need anything, just ask. I owe you one. I said it, but when Alex immediately replied, in that case, could I ask you for a favor? I was still a bit stunned. Alex said he wanted to find an art tutor for Gina. He thought since I lived so close, maybe Gina could come to my place for lessons. I'd already made the offer, so I couldn't really refuse, but I was a little allergic to kids right now. I hesitated. Alex's eyelashes drooped, and he looked genuinely disappointed. Gina's not the easiest to teach. No one wants to take her. I wouldn't bother you otherwise. I had no choice but to agree. The system suddenly popped into my head with a sigh. He'd make a great mission target. But that's all it said. Seeing that I had recovered well, the system left. It had new hosts to guide. Before it left, it asked if I wanted a live feed of what was happening with the Sterling family. I refused. I didn't want them disturbing my new life. I started readjusting to the world that was originally mine. That meant contacting old teachers and friends, practicing my skills at familiar art studios, and finding art dealers to sell my work. I had no choice. I'd blown through most of my money, and my wallet was empty. The rest of my time was spent teaching Gina. Gina really wasn't easy to teach. She was very opinionated and had little artistic talent. I'd teach her about points, lines, and planes. She preferred to scribble circles and add turtles to everything. I didn't push her. I'd draw eggs with sticks coming out of them with her, slipping in little art facts here and there. She liked me a lot. Alex would sit nearby while waiting for Gina, occasionally sketching in a notepad himself. Like Gina, he only drew what he wanted to draw. Mostly faces, all crooked and misshapen. Sometimes, looking at Alex's chicken scratch lines, I couldn't help but correct his grip on the pencil. The more I taught him, the worse he got. When I pointed it out, he'd just smile at me sheepishly. Over time, the three of us grew close. Gina started getting clingy. She'd throw herself onto my lap, tilt her little chin up, and look at me with her big, round eyes. Leo, can I call you Leo? Leo, you're so good at drawing. Can I just watch you draw? I could almost see a little tail wagging furiously behind her. I rubbed my eyes and put the brush back in her hand. She'd whine and go back to drawing her turtles. Alex would then bring over a plate of cut fruit, feeding Gina while gently scolding her, and occasionally feeding me a piece too. One room, 3 people, a child's sweet antics. It was slowly filling a hidden void inside me. By our 20th lesson, a huge storm hit, and Gina was late. Just as I thought they weren't coming, there was a knock on the door. I opened it to find Alex standing there, completely soaked. Seeing him like this, I noticed how trim he was, with broad shoulders and a narrow waist. His semi-transparent shirt clung to his solid chest. His face was paler than usual from the cold, and his lashes were wet with rain. The corners of his eyes were red from the downpour, making the tear-shaped mole beneath his eye all the more alluring. He looked down at me. Leo. I almost slammed the door in his face. What's wrong? I asked him. My ears were burning, and I didn't know where to look. Looking up seemed rude, but looking down seemed even more so. I forgot my umbrella and my keys. Alex's voice was hoarse with a stuffy, nasal sound. Gina has the keys, and she's at her grandma's. Can I use your shower until she gets back? My gut told me letting him in like this was a bad idea, but I hesitated for only 2 seconds before Alex hugged himself and let out a loud sneeze. I had to step aside and let him in. Alex apologized several times, head down, as he dripped his way into the bathroom. The sound of the shower started. I sat in the living room, the atmosphere feeling a bit strange, so I went to the bedroom to find him some dry clothes. I had just found a pair of pants that might fit him when I heard a loud thump from the bathroom, followed by silence. Terrified, I rushed over and threw open the bathroom door. He was lying face up on the floor, apparently passed out. His skin was flushed red, his broad shoulders, narrow waist, and long legs on full display. I rushed to help him up. As soon as I touched his scorching chest, my body shuddered. This felt wrong. It suddenly occurred to me. Was Alex trying to seduce me? I couldn't use pheromones to judge, but my intuition was screaming that this was too intimate. Alex's entire weight fell on me. Shaking the crazy thoughts from my head, I quickly wrapped a towel around him, hauled him to the sofa, and pulled out my phone to call 911. Don't. Alex grabbed my wrist and pulled me down. His eyes were hazy, and his muscular chest pressed tightly against me. My entire body went rigid, my heart completely out of control. Cold, he murmured, burying his head in the crook of my neck and nuzzling against me, sending shivers down my spine. He looked up, his hot breath getting closer and closer to my lips. Alex! Gina's voice from outside the door shattered the charged atmosphere. I shoved Alex away and, with burning ears, went to open the door for Gina. Gina rushed in with a key and a change of clothes and immediately started scolding him. Alex, you forgot your keys. Did you forget your brain too? You should have just waited for me in the rain. What if you get sick? Alex remained in the position I'd pushed him into, not reacting at all. Something felt wrong. I reached out to feel his forehead and immediately recoiled from the heat. He really was sick. The end result was that they both stayed at my place. I gave Alex medicine and made porridge for Gina. Worried about contagion, I put the big one in the master bedroom and the little one in the guest room, and even told Gina a bedtime story as she requested. As I was turning off her light, she threw her arms around me and kissed my cheek. Good night, Leo. For some reason, I froze, unable to form an expression. When Gina's face visibly crumpled with worry, I realized my eyes were red. Leo, what's wrong?
Leo, I'm sorry.
Leo, are you sad? You're not. You're not going to kill yourself, are you? I was shocked she would say that. I wiped my eyes and asked her what she meant. Gina confessed. Alex saw you sitting on the balcony staring into space all the time. He thought something was wrong, so he watched you for a few days. When he ran into you at the bar, you were trying to slit your wrists with a fruit knife. He said you needed to be around people more, so I stared at Gina in disbelief. She misunderstood and started nervously tugging at her shirt. Don't be scared, we're not bad people. I was deeply moved. No, I need to thank you. I had been physically violated against my will, left to suffer alone when I was gravely ill. In 6 years, the only people who had shown me genuine concern were complete strangers. After settling Gina into bed, I walked dazedly back to the master bedroom and sat by the bed, looking at the unconscious Alex. I felt so ashamed for ever thinking he was trying to seduce me. There were so many emotions swirling inside me at that moment. I didn't know where to begin. By the time I came to my senses, my cheeks were wet with tears. After that day, I subconsciously started to think of them both as my new family. I'd go on picnics with them, give them my paintings, and go to art exhibitions with them. Later, at an exhibition, I ran into a teacher I hadn't seen in a long time. He introduced me to several big names in the art world, and with their guidance, I decided to prepare for a solo exhibition. My stagnant life began to flow again. Everything was looking up, until, when I heard a knock and opened the door, a man threw his arms around me. Peeking over his shoulder, I saw Cody. I was stunned. Leo. The man held me tightly, his nose pressed against my neck, instinctively trying to catch my scent. He froze. He realized my build felt wrong, and more importantly, I didn't have his familiar scent. Preston let go of me and took 2 steps back to get a better look. I studied them too. Preston seemed thinner. The suit that once fit him perfectly now looked a bit loose. His cheeks were hollow, his eyes were dark and sunken, and the sharp sparkle in them was gone. Without the influence of pheromones, I realized his charisma and looks weren't all that exceptional. Cody turned his face to the side, sulking like he was waiting for someone to coax him, refusing to look at me directly. He was holding a gift wrapped in colorful paper, which was already torn in places. I suddenly realized I hadn't thought about them once since I'd been back. The love and hate from the Sterling estate felt like a lifetime ago. Seeing them now stirred nothing in me. Maybe I had changed too much for Preston to recognize me with certainty. He looked at my face and said tentatively, "Leo, wrong person." I slammed the door in his face. I had no idea how they got here. I called for the system in my mind, demanding an explanation. There was no response. Alex and Gina were having dinner at my place. Seeing me standing motionless by the door, Alex walked over with his bowl. "Leo, who was it?" "Nobody. Don't worry about it." The words had barely left my mouth when the knocking started again. More urgent this time, as if they wouldn't stop until I answered. Alex looked at me, then reached out and opened the door. This time, Preston was standing closer, a faint smile on his face. When he looked up and saw Alex, his expression changed instantly. "Who is he?" I frowned but said nothing. I didn't feel the need to explain anything to him. Preston saw the bowl in Alex's hand, and anger flared in his eyes. "I went through hell to find you, and you've already found a new man?" Cody saw Alex and me together and blurted out in disbelief, "Papa." The implications in those two sentences were so heavy that Alex nearly dropped his bowl. Gina heard the commotion from the living room and scurried over, poking her head out from between Alex and me. What, Papa?" I sighed and patted her head. "I don't know them." Cody stomped his foot in frustration. "You gave birth to me. Men can't have babies." I started to close the door again. "You really have the wrong person. You should go look somewhere else." Preston grabbed my arm frantically. "Leo, I can explain." Alex blocked his hand. "Sir, please show some self-respect." Preston had a notoriously short temper. He grabbed Alex by the collar, ready to start something. Alex's eyes narrowed, not backing down an inch. "Ah!" Gina screamed, latched onto Preston's leg, and bit down hard. Cody dropped his gift and tried to push Gina away, but she grabbed a handful of his hair. As the situation was about to explode, I kicked the back of Preston's knee, sending him crashing to the ground. Then, in one fluid motion, I pulled Preston back, scooped up Gina, and slammed the door shut. "Leo!" Preston's furious roar came from outside. "What are you doing?" Cody was screaming too. "Papa!" I was losing my patience. "I told you, you have the wrong person. Go away." Preston was relentless. "I'm not leaving until you open this door." "Fine." I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. Maybe there were no police in the angsty ABO world, because Preston looked utterly bewildered as the cops led him away. He shot Alex a venomous glare. "You better watch your back." Then he was shoved along. Cody was terrified. He gave me a hateful look, his eyes red, and ran after Preston. Once they were gone, I turned to walk Alex and Gina home, only to find them exchanging looks. I understood this was probably a lot for them to process. I just felt a pang of regret. I really hoped we could keep things the way they were. They seemed to quickly come to an agreement. "Leo, walk me home," Gina said, acting as if nothing had happened as she threw herself at me. I grabbed my keys, took Gina's hand, and left with Alex. It was only a 3-minute walk from Building A to Building B. Alex's demeanor hadn't changed. On the way, he chatted with me about art classes and the exhibition. Gina was more direct. As soon as we reached her building, she grabbed my arm. "Leo, that kid really is your son, right? I think he looks a lot like you." "He does?" I forced a smile. Back at the Sterling estate, Mrs. Sterling and the servants always loved to say that Cody was the spitting image of Preston, as if that could erase my genetic contribution. Cody was proud of it, too. No one ever said he looked like me. As I was thinking, I bumped right into Alex's back. I looked up and saw that he had stopped too. Both of them were staring at me, their eyes full of unasked questions. I sighed and asked them, "You probably won't believe me if I tell you, but have you ever heard of ABOs?" ABOs, transmigration, the system. I explained everything to Alex and Gina as concisely as I could. When I finished, Gina's mouth was hanging open wide enough to fit an egg. Alex's reaction was much calmer. He seemed to have accepted it completely. "So you're not in the same body now. You could say that. Does that mean you can just think of it all as a bad dream?" "A dream?" Alex smiled. "Yeah. I've had some terrible dreams, too, like jumping off a cliff and shattering into a million pieces. The good thing is, when you wake up, nothing has happened. I even grew taller afterward. He had a unique way of comforting people. I felt a wave of relief and patted his shoulder. You should be careful for the next few days. Preston thinks you're his rival. He might try to come after you. Alex took my hand from his shoulder and held it gently. He looked at me, his eyes like two pools of ink reflecting the moonlight. He's not mistaken. What? I am his rival. His words hit me like a thunderclap. I was dumbfounded, frozen in place. So you like me?
Yeah.
But aren't you straight? I thought you were straight. I tried to seduce you so many times, and you never reacted. The night you brought me home from the bar, you just drunkenly scribbled eeny, meeny, miny, mo on me. The moonlight played with the shadows of the trees. No one spoke. The chirping of insects, the call of a night bird, the rustling of leaves in the wind, and the faint thumping of someone's heart were all crystal clear in the darkness. I suddenly realized how incredibly handsome Alex was. The gentle curve of his eyes was beautiful. The romantic tear-shaped mole was beautiful. The amber-like lobes of his ears were beautiful. The moonlight became liquid, flowing from the sharp tip of his nose to his thin lips. The line of his mouth was drawn tight, as if a mirage might spring forth the moment he opened it. I felt a stir of emotion. When I realized this feeling had nothing to do with pheromones, I wanted to hold on to it. But Alex had a daughter. He wasn't a good choice for me. I pulled my hand back. This can't happen. I don't know if my feelings for you are just transference. The corners of Alex's mouth drooped. He lowered his gaze pitifully and whispered, I shouldn't have chosen this moment. I just couldn't control myself. As we stood in silence, Gina, whom we had both forgotten, piped up. Oh, come on, Leo, give my uncle a chance. He's never pursued anyone before. He's been racking his brain every day trying to get close to you. I was taken aback. Uncle? My parents are gone. My uncle is the one who raised me. Gina tried to say it lightly, but the downturned corners of her mouth betrayed her sadness. But she quickly bounced back. I thought my uncle never dated because of me, but it turns out he just hadn't met the right person. She grinned, taking my hand and then Alex's. If you become my uncle-in-law, it's a buy one get one free deal. Think about it. I was speechless, looking at Alex, not knowing what to say. Alex looked at me pathetically. You don't have to decide right now. I just wanted you to know that I'll always be behind you. I'll wait for you. Alex left me feeling a bit flustered. I was still thinking about his pathetic puppy dog act late into the night. The system, which had been absent for months, suddenly reappeared, greeting me casually as my mind was wandering. Hey, I jumped. System? I heard Preston and Cody showed up.
Yeah.
What's going on? See for yourself. As it spoke, an image of a hospital room appeared before my eyes. I was lying peacefully on the bed with an oxygen mask on, looking just as I had shortly after the gland removal, judging by the clothes and bandages. Preston sat by my bed, staring intently at me, lost in thought. Suddenly, the fingers of the me on the bed twitched. Preston immediately sat up straight, leaning forward anxiously. But there was no further movement from me. The twitch seemed like a figment of Preston's imagination. He sat back, letting out an imperceptible sigh of relief. I knew why. He wanted me to wake up, but he was also afraid of it. He knew the extent of the damage he had caused. Soon, Felix appeared, a look of apology on his face. Preston, you should go rest. This is my fault. I didn't understand my own situation before. A strange twitch contorted the muscles on Preston's face. He didn't say it's not your fault like he used to, and Felix's pause became awkward. Felix quickly added, I'll apologize to Leo when he wakes up. But you've been here for 2 days straight. If you collapse, who's going to take care of him? Convinced, Preston stood up. He must have been sitting for too long, because he stumbled as he rose. Felix rushed to support him. Preston didn't refuse, letting Felix guide him out with unsteady steps. Before leaving, Felix glanced back at the me on the bed, a contemptuous smile playing on his lips. The scene shifted. Preston was standing by the bed again, in a different set of clothes. He asked grimly, why isn't he awake yet? I lay on the bed, eyes closed, visibly thinner. The back of the hand peeking out of the sleeve was already skeletal and gaunt. Felix, Mrs. Sterling, and Cody were also there. Cody seemed unable to face what he was seeing, hiding behind his grandmother and clutching her clothes. Preston questioned the doctor beside him. He's been in a coma for 7 days. The doctor said, we can't find a reason. Preston grabbed the doctor by the collar. What the hell are we paying you for? The doctor remained calm. Mr. Sterling, we explained the risks to you before the surgery. You saw the agreement. Anesthesia complications, surgical bleeding, infection, side effects, we went over all of it with you, and you signed off on it. This clearly struck a nerve. Preston let go, swaying on his feet before collapsing onto the edge of the bed. He reached for my hand, tracing the bones of my fingers absently. Mrs. Sterling spoke up for the doctor. No one wanted this to happen. Let's ask the doctor about treatment options and if he can recover. The doctor straightened his collar and answered truthfully. The patient's body is extremely weak, and he seems to have lost the will to live. I'm afraid he'll likely remain like this. Preston looked up. Remain like this? What do you mean? A vegetable. Cody panicked. He looked up at Felix, just in time to see an irrepressible smile form on Felix's lips. Preston shot to his feet. He couldn't accept it. I remember you said he'd wake up soon after the surgery. He should have. But for some reason, his condition started deteriorating rapidly after that day. Preston gritted his teeth. Check the security footage. Seeing this, I closed my eyes. I already knew what was coming. In the hospital corridor, Preston kicked Cody to the ground, then ripped off his belt and began whipping him mercilessly. You ungrateful little monster. He's your father, and you tried to kill him. Cody scrambled across the floor, wailing like a dinosaur. Mrs. Sterling and Felix stood nearby, feigning concern. What are you doing, hitting a child? But they both took a step back, afraid of getting caught in the crossfire. A passing nurse saw what was happening and rushed over to snatch the belt from Preston. Deprived of his weapon, Preston simply grabbed Cody with one hand and slapped him hard across the face 3 times. Cody's face instantly swelled up. I'm telling you, your papa is gone, and you can forget about being a Sterling. Cody finally broke. Why are you all pretending to be saints? He tore himself from Preston's grasp and screamed at the top of his lungs. You all knew I wanted Felix to be my new papa. You all thought the same thing. Felix was the one who tricked him, you were the one who ripped out his gland, and Grandma was the one who taught me to inject air into his fore. Why am I the only one getting beaten? At his words, the color drained from everyone's faces. Felix looked frantically at Mrs. Sterling. The matriarch pressed a hand to her forehead, feigning a sudden headache. Preston's face was ashen. He lunged for Cody. Cody darted away, hiding behind the nurse and screaming. You're the ones who told me he was a worthless omega, something filthy. You said it didn't matter what I did to him. Felix faked the illness, you dug out his gland, and Grandma taught me to pump air into his fore. So why am I the only one getting hit? Preston took half a step forward, then suddenly clutched his chest and fell to his knees, his chest heaving as if in unbearable pain. The images began to flash by. Preston was sitting by my bed again, holding my skeletal hand, his face gaunt with grief. I was covered with a white sheet and wheeled into the morgue. Preston was drunk in a bar. Felix tried to help him up, but he shoved him away. Preston was gripping the steering wheel, his face dark. Cody sat in the back seat, clutching the colorfully wrapped gift, nervously asking where they were going to find his papa. The car plunged into the sea. The images stopped there. The system told me, we were afraid the mini-world would collapse, so we sent the father and son here. You see, they both love you very much, they just didn't know it. I scoffed. I don't see it. The system said confidently, they're full of regret now. You should consider giving them a chance. You could get a happy ending plus a lot of mission rewards. I refused and told the system something. On my 3rd day back in this world, I went to a nearby department store. As I was washing my hands in the restroom, a tall man reeking of citrus approached me. My first instinct was to pinch my nose, look around for anyone else, and prepare to warn this presumptuous alpha not to release his pheromones so inappropriately. But the man saw my reaction and just sniffed his own sleeve sheepishly. He asked if the scent was too strong, explaining that his girlfriend had sprayed it on him as a joke. I suddenly realized there were no pheromones in this world. No alphas or omegas. No ruts, no heats, no bonds. My entire life wouldn't be derailed by a single mistake. I wouldn't be forced by instinct to become someone's toy. I could breathe freely. Do you know how I reacted? I said to the system. I crouched down right there in front of that man and sobbed. I scared him so badly he ran out of the restroom. The system said, "I understand." It didn't try to push me and Preston together again. It vanished as quietly as it came. Now that Preston and Cody were in this world, they obviously no longer had the privileges that came with the Sterling family name. I don't know how they got out of jail, but the next day, they were trying to get into my apartment complex again. I had specifically asked the security guard to keep them out. They were wearing the same clothes, now wrinkled and shabby after a night, looking utterly pathetic. As I was returning to the complex after breakfast, I saw the guard shaking his head at them, muttering about how Preston should get a decent job and send his kid to school instead of embarrassing himself here. I agreed. Cody stamped his feet in fury. The little prince couldn't stand being lectured by someone he considered lowly. He lunged at the guard, but Preston caught him. In the struggle, Cody saw me. He immediately stopped fighting, bit his lower lip, and looked at me with wounded eyes. "Papa, take me and Dad home. It's so cold out here." I ignored him and turned to the guard to open the gate. Cody's face flushed with anger. Just as he was about to say something, a loud growl rumbled from his stomach. I followed the sound and saw Cody's eyes fixated on the bag of pork buns in my hand. Seeing this, Preston spoke up. "Leo, I know you're all talk. Those buns." I shook the paper bag in my hand. Cody's eyes lit up. Then I tossed it outside the guard post. A small stray dog darted out from the booth, wagging its tail and barking as it tore open the bag and devoured the warm pork buns in a few bites. "They were for the dog," I said. The faces of both Preston and Cody turned black. I was about to go inside when Preston grabbed my arm. "Leo, no matter how angry you are, Cody is still your son. How can you just stand there and watch him starve?" I shook him off and brushed the dust from my sleeve. "He's your son. Nothing to do with me." With that, I started to leave them behind and enter the complex. "Papa, if you treat me like this, I'm not giving you your present," Cody yelled after me. I turned back and saw him pulling a drawing out of the wrapping paper. It was the one I had drawn for him at the Sterling estate, the one he had immediately thrown away. He wanted to show me he'd kept it, that he didn't hate me that much. But I didn't care anymore. Throw it in the trash. I might have underestimated Preston's determination. He and Cody stayed in this world. Preston was a capable man and theoretically could have done well here, but he had a fatal flaw. He was undocumented. As long as no one was watching, it was fine. But if someone was, it was very difficult to find any decent work. I saw him again when I was out with Alex and Gina to see a movie. Alex went to buy bubble tea, and when he didn't come back after a long time, I went to check. I took Gina downstairs to the bubble tea shop and saw Alex, wearing the shop's uniform, beating the crap out of Preston on the floor. People were screaming. I panicked and rushed over to pull Alex off. "What the fuck are you doing?" Preston had completely lost his mind. Even as I held him back, he kicked out at Alex, nearly hitting Gina, who had thrown herself over him. "Don't act innocent. You were hitting me pretty hard just now, Preston." I couldn't take it anymore and slapped him across the face. The slap stunned him. I'm 5'10" now, and my bones are not delicate. The blow made his cheek swell up instantly. He touched his face, his expression looking like it was about to shatter. "Do you have any idea what kind of person he is? No matter what job I find, he gets me fired. I'm forced to sweep floors and wash dishes. He's the one who provoked me just now. He punched me in the stomach. You didn't see that. You only saw him fall and play the victim. Do you know how tired I am every day? Who do you think I'm staying here for?" I was stunned. I looked down at Alex. Alex clutched his chest weakly. "It's my fault. I shouldn't have told him we were going to the movies. I couldn't help it, I just wanted to brag. I'm so happy Leo is giving me a chance. Huh? When did I give him a chance? But I guess he wasn't wrong. You. Preston was seething with rage. People around us started whispering. Words like gay, drama, and stealing her husband floated over to me. Countless eyes, curious and contemptuous, were fixed on me. I felt like I was back at the Sterling estate. Cody pushed through the crowd from somewhere. Seeing the situation, he instinctively blamed me again and lunged forward to hit me. You monster! You're hurting my dad. You. Before he could finish, Gina stood up, took a deep breath, and with her hands on her hips, let out a torrent of abuse in a thick accent. You good-for-nothing, lily-livered, two-bit, half-witted, flea-bitten sons of... She was speaking in some kind of dialect, and I could tell she was defending me, but the constant stream of explosive words, which she rattled off for 3 solid minutes without repeating herself, was enough to shock my 20-plus years of well-behaved existence. She chewed out every single person in the crowd. They scattered. Gina's small figure seemed as mighty as the terrifying neighborhood grandma from my childhood. Filling me with awe, she finished with, "Nobody messes with people under my protection." Both Alex on the floor and I applauded her. Preston was still holding on to me. I thought for a moment, then brushed his hand away. "I'm sorry my friend hit you. I apologize on his behalf. How much compensation would you like to settle this?" Preston stared at me in disbelief. "You're apologizing to me on his behalf?" I nodded. "You." Preston stammered for a moment, then finally clenched his fists and gritted out, "I want you to come to the hospital with me." I pulled out my wallet and took out all the cash I had. "This is all I have. You don't seem to have any visible injuries, so this should be enough." Preston's voice trembled. "You still won't come with me?" I replied, "I have more important things to do, like watching a movie." "Yes." He clutched the few bills in his hand and didn't say another word. Alex leaned weakly against me. I helped him up and led Gina onto the escalator. I asked Alex irritably what was all that about. Alex looked nervous. "I wanted to stand up for you, and I was afraid you'd go soft on your ex-husband." I laughed and smacked him lightly on the head. When we came out of the movie, I found Preston and Cody sitting on a bench just outside the theater. Preston looked exhausted. Cody was curled up asleep on his lap, looking very small. I suddenly realized that the Sterling father and son, who had always lived in luxury, had probably reached their limit. When Preston saw me, he gently shook Cody awake and stood up. Alex quickly stepped in front of me. Preston didn't move. He said calmly, "We just want to apologize." I looked at them with a blank face. Alex was silent for a moment, then thoughtfully led Gina a short distance away. "Leo, I'm sorry," Preston said. Then he nudged Cody. Cody sniffled and mumbled, "Papa, I'm sorry." I had finally received their long overdue apology. It was strange. I thought I would feel vindicated, relieved, but I felt nothing at all. Back at the Sterling estate, I had dreamed of the day they would regret everything. I imagined them kneeling and crying to soothe the churning humiliation and pain in my chest. But in reality, once I returned to a normal world and built healthy relationships, I quickly found my center again and purged myself of all those draining emotions. The father and son were still talking. Cody kept his head down, tugging at the hem of his shirt. "I was bad to you. I should have been on your side, protected you." Preston also confessed his feelings. "I didn't understand my own heart, and I did a lot of things to hurt you." "Okay, I get it. You can go now." The Sterlings were stunned. They were both used to being spoiled, supremely confident in their relationships, believing that if they just deigned to turn back, they could fix anything. They never imagined that their condescending apology would not be met with forgiveness. Tears streamed down Cody's face. "You don't want me anymore? You want Gina? But I'm your real son." Seeing me turn to leave, Preston grabbed me. "Leo, after you fell into that coma, I didn't sleep a single night. My feelings for Felix were just about regret. He kept pestering me to permanently bond with him, saying he would help me move on. But every time I closed my eyes, I felt you beside me. I love you. I've loved you for a long time. I was just too arrogant, too stupid, and I lost you. It was a miracle that I got a second chance to be near you. I really can't live without you. Please forgive me, but I don't love you." My words stopped Preston cold. The rest of his speech died in his throat, and he looked like a goose with its neck caught. The year I walked into Preston's room by mistake, I was on a painting trip. There were 8 of us traveling together, and I was the only one from an orphanage. Preston says sweeping floors and washing dishes is exhausting, but I've been doing jobs like that since I was 14. To buy one decent box of paints, I had to wash 300 dishes or stand on a street corner in a mascot costume for an entire afternoon. I drew tens of thousands of paintings just to get into art school, to get the same chance as everyone else. Of course, I dreamed of having the whole world see my art, but all of that vanished after that day. I had offended the Liu family. My reputation was in tatters. No one dared to buy my paintings anymore. I was destitute, forced to live in a basement, permanently bonded to Preston, not knowing I was pregnant. That period was hell. I had splitting headaches all night. I threw up constantly. I couldn't sleep. My gland burned like a red-hot wire had been threaded through it. At the time, I just thought it was pheromone deprivation and forced myself not to go to him, until I collapsed and ended up in the hospital. Only after Mrs. Sterling arrived did I find out I was pregnant with Cody. I never had a choice. No one ever gave me a choice. You say I owe Felix. What do I owe him? He was the one who noticed me looking at you a couple of times and deliberately bribed the front desk to make me go to the wrong room. He was the one who couldn't remember your rut schedule and showed up late because he wanted to see me made a fool of, which is what led to all of this. Preston, don't tell me you couldn't have found that out. And even if we ignore all that, are you innocent? Weren't you the one who bonded with me, got me pregnant, and betrayed Felix? What reason do I have to love you? Is it because you ripped out my gland so cleanly? My torrent of words left Preston barely able to stand. He stammered uselessly, "I know I wronged you. Give me a chance. Let me spend the rest of my life making it up to you." I gave him a cold laugh. "I don't need it." "Then what do you need?" "What I needed, I already got the moment you tore out my gland." I leaned in close, whispering in his ear. "Preston, a reverse bond is agony, isn't it?" All the blood drained from Preston's face. I know Preston's body better than my own. After years of being entangled with him, of him taking whatever he wanted from me, he only knew that I was severely dependent on his pheromones. He had no idea that his own dependency was even worse than mine. I discovered he was reverse bonded to me in our second year at the Sterling estate. He thought the reason he never sought out other omegas was because he was being faithful. In reality, it was because he couldn't. He probably agreed so easily to have my gland removed for Felix because he thought Felix would be the exception. And even if the transplant failed, an alpha can bond with multiple omegas. It wouldn't have been a big deal. But how terrible. He can't bond with anyone but me. Can he? Preston stammered, You knew all along? Why didn't you tell me? I stepped back. Why would I tell you? That involuntary pain, that scorching thirst, that delirium, that rage, that fury, that despair of wanting something you can't have, why should I be the only one to suffer through that? Yes. There was no one left in this world who could satisfy him. He would gradually lose his mind in a state of pheromone deprivation, constantly feeling like a million ants were crawling in his brain, in pain, vomiting, unable to sleep, so violent he'd want to tear everything apart, until he became a complete madman. Preston erupted in fury. His pheromones exploded around him, a terrifying, aggressive wave. The citrus scent, normally only perceptible to alphas and omegas, flooded outwards, so intense it was like hundreds of perfume bottles had shattered. Even people across the street could smell it. Cody, crushed by the pheromonal pressure, fell to his knees, tears and snot streaming down his face as he clutched Preston's pants and cried for his dad. Preston didn't even notice him, but the pheromones couldn't affect me anymore. I stood straight and tall in the midst of that overwhelming, acrid scent that had imprisoned me for half my life, and I smiled, brighter than ever. Preston, I suggest you get your glands removed. It's the only way. Get rid of them, and you won't have to suffer anymore. Alex and Gina ran toward me. Preston lunged at me too. I heard the system's metallic voice in my head. Excessive intervention. Excessive intervention. Retracting. The instant his fingers were about to touch me, Preston vanished from before my eyes. Alex and Gina skidded to a halt, terrified, but then ran the rest of the way to my side. Are you okay? Whoa, Leo. Was that a magic trick? Now I believe you've been to other worlds. The citrus scent slowly faded. I walked over to the kneeling Cody and helped him up. Papa, Cody sobbed, trying to hug me, but I held him by the shoulders. Cody Sterling, I said, using his full name. He looked at my face anxiously, unable to stop his sobs. I once thought you were a gift from heaven, but now I know the truth. Look at him. He was looking more and more like Preston every day. Sharp brows, cold eyes, a darkness growing deep within them, like thorns twisting in a place the sun could never reach. I once held him so sincerely, letting him pierce me with 1,000 wounds. He was my flesh and blood, and he was the sickness that grew inside me. Only by putting a world between us could I save my own life. In this world, some parent-child relationships aren't relationships at all. They're a curse. I was the one who wanted to have you. That you were born to me means I owe you a debt. Now, my debt is paid. I'm setting you free. I've already found the child I want, and I hope you can find the papa you want. The system took Cody away too. It apologized to me, saying I should never have had to bear the consequences of its mistake, and promised that the Sterling father and son would never be able to bother me again. After that, my solo exhibition was back on schedule. Seeing visitors standing in small groups before my paintings, discussing and critiquing them with looks of approval, my chest swelled with a sense of fulfillment. 2 lifetimes, and only now had I finally gotten everything back. After the exhibition, Alex drove me and Gina to the beach. I recognized the logo on his car. I'd already guessed Alex might be wealthier than I thought when Preston accused him of sabotaging his life. This was probably his way of showing me his true self. And I was right. When we got to the beach, he showed me a sky full of fireworks, bursting over the entire shore. That day, when I heard you say you'd found the child you wanted, Gina and I were so happy. Under the fireworks, Alex stood beside me, his voice full of deep emotion. I had originally thought that if you wanted to go back to him, I could just be your friend. Even though I can't help my feelings, your happiness is what matters. The moment our son, Cody, was born, he was handed over to the matriarch. But then I understand now. You can't pin your happiness on other people. Leo, would you let me be a part of your happiness? How could one person be such a drama queen and so good at wagging his tail? What could I do? I had to say yes. 6 months later, Alex and I went abroad to get married. The happiest person was Gina. She ran around the room with our marriage certificate for 2 whole laps. My successful exhibition launched my career. Now, the money from selling 1 painting is enough to buy a new house. Alex's office also has one of my paintings hanging in it. His true identity is the CEO of some publicly traded company, but that's not important anymore. The system appeared a couple more times later to update me on the fate of the Sterling father and son in their original world. Preston could have avoided a mental collapse if he had just had his own glands removed. But he was afraid he would lose his standing in high society. So instead, he forcibly took Felix's gland and had mine transplanted into him. My gland had been preserved in the hospital for months. Its viability was low, and the transplant led to a severe rejection reaction. Felix was ruined, too. The family went after the Sterlings, sending Preston to prison for kidnapping and assault. I heard he got 10 years. Mrs. Sterling had a heart attack from the stress and was moved into a nursing home. The Sterling family fell from grace, and Cody was sent to live with distant relatives. I heard he wasn't treated well, but none of that has anything to do with me anymore.